I am starting the live stream.
Morning, everyone. This is the September 22nd meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee. I can see from the list that we have a quorum. All members of the committee are present, including County Chair, Board Chair Dave Bartlett. So we'll proceed. Maybe first approval of minutes for the September 8th meeting. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Morehouse moves approval of the September 8 minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork seconds.
Thank you. Any corrections or revisions to the minutes as they were just presented? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. We have no public hearing today. Maybe before we start the meeting, and I'm going to ask for an agenda revision too, but just to note that you may all know that over the weekend, Dan Prestovac from the Land Conservation Office brother died in a motorcycle accident and a tragic event. I think Dan is going to be with us on the call despite that, but Dan, we should all know that our hearts go out to his family and this really difficult time. So with that, we have a request to do an agenda switch. At the end of the meeting, there is a resolution selecting the 2021 Conservation AIDS Program project. This is something that we do every year with the money that's available. And we have someone from the DNR who would like to speak to this. So rather than having her sit through our long but interesting meeting, without objection, I would move that item to the top of the agenda. Is there any problem with that? Okay. Missy, are you on?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. So I just wanted to thank you guys for the county AIDS funds. We're looking at using them for doing a pollinator prairie planting at Dunnville Wildlife Area. So we have a 43-acre field that we are it was being sharecropped, and it just isn't working well for the sharecroppers. So we're going to convert that to a prairie planting and like to try something a little different and get a little more variety and forbs out there. So to help out the pollinators, since that's a big need right now. So this funding would really help with that. We would use it to kind of increase our forbs or wildflowers that will really benefit the pollinators and other grassland species that use that property. Dunnville Wildlife Area, for those that know, is a really unique property, has some great areas. We have actually a 200-acre remnant prairie there. So this is just kind of helping and adding on to that great grassland habitat that we have available. So we're also just so you know too, just trying some different management techniques around the county and on our grasslands, because we've got challenges with funding and the lack of burning and things like that. So one of the kind of neat things that we're trying this year is we're doing some grazing. And we are working with a local farmer on one of our properties, a 40-acre field at Muddy Creek Wildlife Area. And then we're got cows on for the first time this year. So we're really anxious to see how that works out. And hopefully that's, a technique that we can keep moving forward, and don't know for sure what'll happen down at Dunnville, but at least we're trying some new things and seeing how that goes. But as far as the county AIDS funds, it's for doing this 43-acre restoration down at Dunnville Wildlife Area.
Thanks, Missy. Are there any questions or comments from the committee or staff? Okay, I'm really happy to hear about the grazing initiative. I think that's an interesting project and be good to see how it works firsthand in Dunn County.
Tom, this is Dan. I am
Hi,
on.
Dan. Yeah, okay, hi.
Okay. Um, I guess I'd just like to say a few words about Prairie Restoration. It's very expensive. Um, First for the grasses that would be in this mix probably, but the flowers, and that's what we need for pollinators. I don't know, for those of you that were back on the Land and Water Planning Committee, we looked at the slide that showed the grocery store with pollinators and the grocery store without pollinators. They're very important. We're introducing them back in seedings, in CREP, in CRP, and I think it's good to introduce them back into Dunnville too.
Thanks, Dan.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jim.
I would like to add too, there's another great benefit. I have the great honor of driving 2 stout biology classes down to the Dunnville Bottoms on Friday, October 2nd. And so these students go down there from Stout and they study and see what we're doing. And it's just an awesome experience to see. And now with what you're doing here now, with the pollinators and everything else, I think it's just a great project. And, so it's an educational benefit for our university and our public school students as well. So great project.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else? Could I get a motion to approve the participation and allocation?
Also move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Kinnear seconds.
I think I got Diane Morehouse first on that. So go with that. Any further discussion? All in favor of the allocation, say aye.
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 Opposed? Great, got that done. Sounds like a great project. Thanks a lot, Missy, for coming on and sharing it with us. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, you guys. Have a great day.
So we have no public hearing. We are down to 5A, update on groundwater ad hoc committee recommendations. Not sure how we're going to do this. We don't have the template in the packet. So in the absence of that, is anyone on the staff ready to prepare to sort of review this? If not, I guess, are there thoughts from the committee members about the recommendations? Last meeting, we had a presentation on the website development. I'm assuming that's still going forward.
Yes, that is going forward, I guess at a slow pace.
Yeah.
As far as what I know is happening with groundwater, next is kind of coming up. Next Monday is the day that we're scheduled to collect about 30 samples from wells in the Hay River or the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers led watershed, and those will be shipped to Stevens Point for the homeowners package and be added to that database for the groundwater website. To our county groundwater database. I think so far we've got commitments from 22 landowners to do their sampling, and we're looking for about 8 or 10 more to have that done next Monday and be sent to Stevens Point on Tuesday.
Okay.
We did have in Land and Water, we had 2 farmer-led watershed grants that were due yesterday, so we just I haven't had time to work on.
That's fine. All right. Anybody on the committee want to make bring anything up or note anything? If not, we'll just move this forward to future meeting. Okay, let's do that.
Supervisor Kinnear here.
Yes.
Just as far as what we're moving forward, last time we decided that we needed more information in a web page, water site explanations, and we're going to designate or think about designating somebody to take the lead. Is that what we're going to discuss next time?
Yes. Let's put this back on the agenda for the I'm not sure what it looked like for the next meeting, Mike, but as soon as possible. If not next meeting, the meeting after that, and we expect to follow up on those questions. Yes. Okay. 5B, review of draft land division ordinance. I think this is the 4th or 5th time we've reviewed this, so.
Right, we're getting down now to just some real fine details. Hoping to put the finishing touches up on this, either this meeting or perhaps one more. So what I will do is Corp Counsel and I have worked on this since our last meeting, and I will just highlight the areas that we've either revised or made some changes or additions to. So I'm going to start on line 85 and 86. So this is part of the environmentally sensitive area definition. We removed or struck about half of the sentence in item C here as identified by the DNR. Reason for that is chapter 236 of state statute gives the authority to a professional land surveyor as well to determine ordinary high water marks. So by having this language as is, it restricts the determination to only the DNR. And again, state law allows the professional land surveyor to make that determination as well. So that's the reason for that change. We move down to line 102. We completely removed the definition for high value agricultural land. You may remember at the last several meetings, we've had some lengthy discussions on this topic. We will get to 1610 here shortly. We feel that we have high value ag land defined in the section itself. So there is no need, it's not necessary to separately define high value ag land. And you'll see that here in a few minutes when we get into section 1610. You may remember at the last meeting, I was on record as mentioning that I would be meeting with the Land and Water Conservation and Zoning staff to define lowest building opening for structures and develop design standards to prevent damage to structures which are proposed to be built near wetlands, retention ponds, or are in a mapped floodplain area. After much discussion and consideration, staff have all come to the conclusion that while this is an important topic, the County Land Division Ordinance is not the place for us to regulate or impose standards related to building elevations. Having standards would result in additional inspections having to be performed by county staff and raises potential liability issues for the county if, say, damages were incurred by landowners. Additionally, the county's floodplain ordinance already regulates lowest building opening elevations in floodplain areas. So for these reasons, we have decided at this time not to include the lowest building opening standards into this draft. Is there any questions on that? It's more of a UDC, Uniform Dwelling Code, and maybe it's already in there, I'm not sure, but we just feel it's not appropriate to have those type of regulations in a land division ordinance.
Any comments or questions?
Tom, we did have some more discussion on that, and it is done in several counties, but it's not enforced by the county, but it is put on there for the builder, and it actually may give us more protection than not asking for it. But
Could you explain that further, Dan?
Well, if you ask I mean, there's a definition of what this lowest building elevation is in the floodplain ordinance. And if you ask the surveyor to put it on there, then anyone that buys that lot from now on knows it's there. And if their basement ends up wet and they come back to the county and say, well, I've got these problems, then you look at their lowest building elevation, and if they're below that, they, it isn't something we need to enforce, I don't think, but it is something that is defined and able to be expressed on a map.
Just to be clear, are you saying that we should include that in here then, or that?
Well, I apologize. I was not in the discussion when Tom and Bob met on it. But I did have some discussion later, and I know that, St. Croix County has it on there, and they're definitely feel that it has value because it lets the person that buys that lot in the future realize that, there's potential for flooding and that they need to keep that basement and that lowest building above that.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Sure.
ask a question?
Yep.
So St. Croix County has it in their floodplain ordinance, Dan?
I believe it's in their subdivision ordinance.
Oh, okay. And are you arguing to have it back in?
Well, I apologize for bringing this up at the meeting. I didn't talk to Tom about this ahead of time. I'd like to just review that with him again.
So my thought is that this is worthy of further review. Anybody have a problem with that? Sorry, guys. I'm glad you brought it up, Dan. I mean, it may or may not be appropriate, but it's an important point that needs to be part of the discussion. So Tom, can we flag this again?
Yes, already done.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move on. Line 29290. So under suitability standards, paragraph 4, we added this language at the direction of the committee after our discussion last time. I believe it was Supervisor Kinnear mentioned inserting this in here with another comma. So we added groundwater contamination susceptibility. Any questions on this? Then 1610, division of Plapa high value ag land. There was some discussion on this that, we were limiting it to areas that were only identified in the comprehensive plan as being farmland preservation plan certified. And I believe it was Supervisor Bjork mentioned that, there's a lot of other land in the county that's being farmed that is very highly productive or high value ag land, may not necessarily be identified in the comp plan. We reworked this language. You can read it here. It says such areas shall include, but not be limited to, those areas identified as being farmland preservation plan certified according to the comp plan. So what this is saying is all those areas in the comp plan will be included, but it's not going to be limited to just those areas. So any questions on this language? Any suggestions?
Supervisor Bjork? I
Yes.
think that's a very good reason. I know in the town of Colfax, there's a lot of good land, but because of our zoning, we're not eligible for farmland preservation. So a lot of this has to do with your zoning. If it's not properly zoned, the way it was said before is that you will not have high value ag land. So a lot of it has to do with just the zoning part of it. I think I'm right on that. Right, Dan?
Yes, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I think this looks very good and it deals with the questions we had before. So thanks for the wordsmithing and the changes.
Okay, I will keep moving on. We'll go all the way down to page 21 and be on line 791. Be the next change we've made. So this section, just back up here a moment, but this section is actually dealing with surface drainage and erosion control. So we struck the word landowner and replaced it with all property owners. If we're in a major land division, certainly we're going to have multiple landowners that are going to be responsibility for the maintenance of these drainage systems and ponds. So what we did under paragraph 8 is we broke out the second half of it and just replaced it. We created a new paragraph 9. We just broke that section out and called it its own section. So nothing changed there with the verbiage. And then paragraph 10 is new. We added this. And so many times you have a provision in your ordinance and you think it's, you know, it's the greatest thing. But then when you start looking at it from a practical standpoint, I guess the question in my mind came up, you know, a lot of times these drainage areas or retention ponds are located away from a public road, public street. And if they're going to be sitting on their own outlot and say it's failing, we need to get in there and inspect it. Now we're crossing privately owned property without an easement to get to it. So what happens in those situations? So item 10 addresses that. The department may require a minimum 15-foot wide access easement dedicated to the county to allow for any future inspection and maintenance work. Any such easement shall be located on adequate soil or surfacing to withstand loads produced by standard construction equipment. The access easement shall not include any area where channelized flow of runoff occurs or where stormwater may pond to a depth greater than 6 inches during a 100-year, 24-hour design storm. So the word may is in here because there certainly could be situations where the outlot has frontage on a public highway and we would not require an easement. But for those situations where we'd be crossing private property, this would give us the permission, I guess, or access to get into that pond. And this easement would be shown right on the final plat. So any questions on this?
Questions, Mr. Chair? But this is not for a public easement. This is only for staff or for like Dunn County, correct? This is not a public easement.
Correct, Supervisor Bjork. The easement would be granted specifically to Dunn County for this specific purpose.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right, moving on. This next item I want to address was not highlighted or coded in red in your packet, but it's something that, again, came up in my mind as I was reviewing the draft, and I think it's something we certainly need to talk about. So line 1001, item F, and just to give you some perspective here, we're under the lot standards, section 16.46, lot standards. This is where we're talking about soil tests, right, for these lots. So if you're less than 1.5 acres, you're going to need 3 soil borings. 1.5 acres to 15, you're going to require 1, minimum of 1, and then 15 or greater than 15 acres. If you're carving that out, you're not required to have any borings. So item F here says such tests may be waived by the zoning office if, and we've got 3 items here. One thing that came up in my mind is a soil tester going to be able to perform a soil test in frozen ground conditions? Because certified survey maps just don't stop in the wintertime. To give you some perspective, I went back the last 5 years and I picked January 1st to the end of March, which in my mind, those 3 months are typically when we have frost in the ground. Generally, I realize some years the frost doesn't get very deep, other years it's extremely deep, but just to have a basis for discussion, I picked those 3 months. In the last 5 years, we've averaged 13 certified survey maps. In the last 5 years, we averaged 65 total on the year. So when you crunch the numbers, those 3 months encompass or entail approximately 20% of the certified survey maps we get in during the year. So if a soil test is not going to be able to be completed during those 3 months, generally speaking, what we're effectively doing is limiting the land development in the winter time. And I'm not saying the soil test can't be done that time of the year with extreme frost, but this came to my mind in the last few days, and I have not had a chance to consult with or speak with or multiple soil testers to find out, can these tests be done? Say we have 3 feet of frost in the ground, which is certainly possible. Can these tests be done at that time of the year? So this is something I certainly want to come back with a committee with at the next meeting. In between here, I will contact some soil testers and collect some more factual data. But I guess in my mind, if these tests are not going to be able to be performed in extreme weather conditions, then under item F here, we may want to have some type of provision addressing that. One thing I did notice is item G here under 3G, or actually under item G, I'm sorry. It says all lots that do not require a minimum of 3 soil borings need to have a note placed on the map. So perhaps, under item F here, the zoning office could waive the tests in the middle of winter given extreme conditions, but then we would need some type of notation on the map. Because let's just say they record a 4-lot certified survey map on, 1.25 acre lots that would have required 3 borings. So then they finally get them done. They come in to so they record the certified survey map, convey the lots. 4 landowners come in the middle of April wanting a sanitary permit. Well, now they have to conduct these borings and find out that, hey, it's in a very marginal area. We're only going to be allowed a holding tank here. And holding tanks, according to our ordinance, under item H, are prohibited for construction of new residential dwellings. So now we've got 4 lots on the books that can't be built upon for residential purposes. So I guess we have to, this is an area that I think certainly was overlooked and I want to address with the committee in the next few weeks here. So, and Nick, if you're listening, one thing I did notice under item G, right here, we cross-reference paragraph E. So any lots created under paragraph E above, we actually added an item E, which is the rounding. So our E now has become F. So that E down here under G will have to be replaced with F. So any questions from the committee on this?
One question, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
So could those tests be waived because of a soil type? Because we've had an updated like your soil survey like 10, 12 years ago. If the soils come back great for a septic system, could those those tests be waived?
This is getting in an area slightly outside of, or definitely outside of my area of expertise, the sanitation and soils. I'm no expert in that, but I guess I don't know that we want to be waiving. Perhaps Bob could chime in, Bob Colson. I don't know, it's just my personal opinion that we'd want to be waiving tests based on a generalized soils map. I mean, Bob, do you have any input on this?
Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, I agree with you. I think that even while yes, we do have some new soils maps, they're very generalized maps, and where it shows the change between one soil to another, that's a distinct line on the map. In the field, it doesn't happen that way, and so I would say that that we would probably, I would recommend not giving a waiver just because the soils map says that it's okay. That we would want that hard data just to verify what's in the ground.
And if I could expand on it, I guess in my mind, if I'm a landowner and I'm looking at these soils maps, or I have a plumber looking at them, or a soil tester, and I have a pretty good indication from the maps that I'm going to get something here other than a holding tank. Maybe it's at my own risk. I go ahead and record the certified survey map. I have the test done. Once conditions allow me to do that, whether it's April or May, and I'm going to roll the dice and take my chances that these newly created lots are going to be built upon, I'm going to get some type of a system on there. But just how to incorporate all that in, right now it's missing. And I think it's certainly an oversight that, you know, we didn't account for, that needs to get put in here in some fashion. So otherwise, without it, we certainly are going to back people into a corner in the middle of February when they can't get a soil test done. Now, all this is predicated, of course, on the fact that you can't do soil tests in frozen ground. After talking with some soil testers here in the coming days, maybe I will find that I'm way off base on this, that a soil test can be done in frozen conditions, in which case this is all maybe a moot point. But fact of the matter is, some more research needs to be done on this.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
I believe that concludes. I mean, we've been having 2-hour discussions on this. Now we're down to just a few sections. So I don't have anything further to add on the changes that were made, unless the committee has any other recommendations or suggestions or topics they would like to discuss relative to this draft.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't have anything to add, but I really want to compliment Tom and excuse me, Tom and Nick for being so responsive to the issues that we've sometimes beaten into the ground, but thanks for this excellent work. It's really a fine job, I think.
We all, thanks, Dan. I think we all share that. It's going to be a good ordinance. We're done with it.
So I guess going forward, then I would like to bring this back one more time. Maybe at the next meeting, then we can put our final blessing on this, so to speak. And then the next step would be to do a public hearing and work out all the details of that, given the pandemic and proper protocols for that. So.
Okay. Without further questions, let's move on to the next item, which is a review of the draft land use ordinance. Dan, you.
Wait. What is
No,
the,
excuse me, draft manure management ordinance, excuse me. Item C.
okay. Okay, we had this on the agenda 2 weeks ago, and I believe the ordinance that we have today is the same ordinance, and we asked that it be reviewed. Travis Dreyer and I have reviewed it. We found a few errors, minor errors that needed to be corrected, and I believe Supervisor Kinnear sent one correction to Nick. So I don't know if you want to go through this from top to bottom, or do you want me to point out some of the highlights of what I want, I think that are real important?
Why don't we, go through it, but not without in a general way, then you point out, and you can ask for questions from the committee at any point in time. And then if you want to note the things you think are the most relevant, that would be helpful.
Well, I think when we look at after the first page here, Tom, if you want to go to like line number 12, I think right there, we're really doing this because we know that runoff from spread manure contains a lot of phosphorus, and we also know that manure storage structures can leak into the groundwater. We know that just mismanaging manure can be detrimental, and this puts in writing some of the reasons why we're doing this, and why we have an ordinance. And and then at the back of the ordinance, it's going to talk about the enforcement and the citation authority that's been put in here. A lot of this comes down to discretion, and I know that Supervisor Bjork and I have had some discussions on that before. it's a lot on um, how we work with farmers. I definitely, as a county conservationist, don't have a heavy hand for regulation, but I do expect farmers to address this, these minimum standards, and I feel that they're reasonable, and I think in most cases they're obtainable. But we're doing this to protect our groundwater and our surface water. And at the time, and some of the methods that we have to do that do require some cost to the landowner, and in the long run, hopefully they provide some, that it pays for itself in following a nutrient management plan. So I think this findings of fact here by the county, by the committee is important to take a look at these, the reasons for doing these things. But on line 12 there, that we know that polluted runoff is getting to our surface water, and we know that it's getting to our groundwater. And I feel, we've incorporated quite a few standards to do that.
Could you scroll down to the bottom of the purpose and, oh, there you go. Yeah, okay. Any questions on this section?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
a comment. What I have observed oftentimes isn't necessarily farmers, but some hobby people with a few horses or other animals for recreation, and they can do a good deal of the same damage. I think, as I read this, we tend to think that much of this comes from dairy cattle or hogs or sheep or things like that. Oftentimes it's from hobby people with a few horses. I see this, and I'm sure it bothers everybody, but my question is, why can't we have more? We all know areas like that. That's my observation. That bothers me.
Yeah, and I think that's very true, Jim. A few animals in the wrong place can cause a lot of damage as compared to a large number of animals correct and their waste correctly managed. There's no doubt about that. And some of these provisions in here would apply to small groups of animals, especially when we get into the performance standards on line 288. I won't say they apply in all cases, but they will in
Okay.
most.
Why don't we, those are good comments, Jim. Thanks. And thanks, Dan. Why don't we move on then with keeping that in mind?
Okay, Tom, can you look at line 268? I just like to call the committee's attention to these unconfined manure piles, and make you realize that the stacking of manure on the ground temporarily does not constitute the requirement for a permit. Okay, but the location of these unconfined manure piles is regulated. They're not allowed in a water quality management area. Okay, and then I think we can go up to line 249 and just take a look at what a water quality management area is. And that is definition in state law, land that includes any of the following: an area within 1,000 feet of the ordinary high water mark of a navigable lake, pond, or flowage, or within 300 feet of an ordinary high water mark of a stream or river. And then that's a pretty narrow definition. It has to be a navigable stream, it has to be a navigable lake. But then the next part of that definition goes to an area that is susceptible to groundwater contamination. And there's where we actually broaden that definition out and actually leave more interpretation to the person that is looking at that. And there is quite a bit of language that you can find. I don't believe it's contained in the statutes always about what is an area that's susceptible to groundwater contamination. It's area within, I believe, 200 feet of a well. It's definitely Dunn County. It's rock quarries on the western part of the county that are no longer used. People love to stack manure there, but there's definitely potential for contamination of a conduit down to the groundwater. So I just wanted to call your attention to that definition. And maybe we need to further define areas susceptible to groundwater contamination, but it does leave a big more area contamination. And
So, Dan, what do you see with regard to larger, operations and say composting, piling of compost? Is that becoming more prevalent, more popular?
I think we're going to see more composting. And right now, I would look at composting as far as the only language we have in this ordinance would be back down in the language on 268 as an unconfined manure pile.
Right.
Okay. And now if you go into, I believe it's the nutrient management standard, unconfined manure piles cannot be located in the same place 2 years in a row.
Oh,
Okay. So that would require compost to be moved if it were not, if it's going to be in the same place every year, then it would have to be on, some type of a asphalt or a
Oh, I see. Yeah.
concrete bottom, and then you could do that. But if you were composting on the ground, that's the way this standard deals with it.
Okay.
I've had some conversation with John Sipple. He's not real comfortable with that, but we have not found anything that's any better way to address it. Okay.
No, he's not comfortable with that being the requirement, that it be moved to new ground every year.
Right.
That may be insufficient, or that.
Yes, he feels. I think that we need to look at the soils under that pile that's composted and a little more on the slope.
Right. I can see that.
And I'm not sure if we can find a standard or, one to do that, because right now there really aren't standards that I know of on the composting. I haven't been able to.
Well, we want to encourage composting for sure.
Yes, we do. But we also need to encourage it in,
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask you this, just a clarification. When you say high water mark, I mean, are we dealing with, how does that relate to occasional flooding events? Is that considered a high water mark, or is that just an extraordinary situation?
Okay, can you go back up to that? What was that line, Tom? Water quality management area. I think it was in the W's. Yeah. Okay, right there. The ordinary high water mark would be the area of a stream or lake that is no longer has vegetation on it. It wouldn't be anything with the floodplain. Okay. We have had issues on the Chippewa River, where we have worked with certain landowners, and they agreed not to pile their manure in that area again, but some of them are located entirely in that floodplain.
Right.
It depends on, what else is available. On our smaller streams, it's, not a big issue, but this water quality management area, Tom, that's a good point, does not refer to the floodplain.
So with a stacked manure, you could, and you had a flooding event, you could have a pretty significant
You could have
discharge.
a loss.
What to do about that, but that's a problem,
Mhm.
potential problem.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Any
then
other
what
questions
about
on this? On this? If we want to move on to something else, Dan, go ahead.
Okay. Um, let's go down to line 289. Okay, right here, 289, I want to add a little language there so that when the standards change, the ordinance changes. And I think we just need to trust NRCS there to adopt standards that are reasonable and protect the environment. Um, right here, we just are, it doesn't say we're adopting it on a certain date, but I think we need to make sure that, and Nick, you can chime in on that, but I think you agree. We need to, yes, we're either doing it on a date or we're going to do it to include the standards in the future. But I think I want to include them as they change because it's real hard to go back and use an old standard. And then you've got the new one in the book, and then you've got to have the old one to go by. And it's one of the things that DATCAP has recommended that we make sure that we move with the standard. So
we we can add some language in there that would,
yeah,
so that it clearly includes any updates or changes made to these technical standards.
mm-hmm. And then now on line 290 there, that is, that is all totally brand new there. We're putting, the performance standards or Wisconsin's runoff rules for farmers in this ordinance. At I shouldn't say we're putting them in there. That's, a committee decision whether to include those, but I'm recommending that they go in. And that, first of all, is the sheet rill erosion on 290, the tillage setback. These items are contained in NR 151 of the administrative code, and then ATCP 50 is the DATCAP rule that gives us the practices and many times adopted NRCS practices to meet these performance standards. So, if you haven't looked at this entire ordinance, make sure you pay attention to the section 10.09 because that's where, most of the new items are contained in this ordinance, especially number 290, 293, 300, the phosphorus index. They don't specifically mention on 300 the SNAP Plus. This is how it is worded in state law, but in the ATCP 50 code. But SNAP Plus is a nutrient management software. It's pretty well adopted. It is adopted by Department of Ag. It's Trade and Consumer. The Russell 2 soil loss is a little bit different in SNAP Plus. It's a watered down version of the actual revised universal soil loss equation. But so the SNAP Plus is a software, according to this ordinance, is used for doing the phosphorus index on 300, but it's not legally. I'm pointing, Tom. Go up again to the line 290, the sheet and rill erosion. That goes right back to the universal soil loss and wind erosion equations is what we need to use for that if we're going to really get down. But I don't see us really getting down. I think SNAP Plus is pretty well used. So are you understanding that? Is there questions on that?
Supervisor Kinnear here, Dan. Did you just say I'm a little confused. Did you just say there's different ways of evaluating things, but
Okay,
we're just going to use Snap Plus?
well, when you look at line 305 that he has here for nutrient management planning and 300, I mean, Snap Plus is the um, accepted, developed, adopted statewide nutrient management software. Okay, that's what 99% of the nutrient management plans are developed now under the Snap Plus software. And um, but there's an abbreviated soil loss equation in there that we probably would not use if we were doing something under 290. Okay, but and maybe I'm getting too deep into this.
No, it's okay. Well,
Okay.
why do you say that, Dan?
Well,
What's your rationale?
When what they put in that Snap Plus software, it's made it a little bit um, generalized. It has a soil type and it has an assumed slope and a length. Where when you really would, if you were going to use the sheet and rill erosion under Russell 2 up here, then you need to actually go on that field and do the measurements and put those into your universal soil loss equation.
So the way this is written now, you as the enforcement officer would have the discretion to use Russell to deal with the sheet, rill, and wind.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. You'd have the discretion. You could use Russell too. Otherwise, in most cases, it would all come under the Snap Plus software that you'd use to do 300,
Okay.
305. Okay. I didn't mean to
So just curious. So not often, but occasionally, you drive past I can think of a couple examples where you run across a field where it just seems like the erosion is extreme and the tillage has been probably extremely misguided for whatever reason, or mistakes were made. In what way does this or any would this ordinance be able to allow you to have some, in the extreme situations like that, have some regulatory authority over that, or would it not?
It definitely would be able to go out and talk to that landowner and say, okay, right now I would have to go out and talk to them and say, you know, the what you're doing is over and above the universal soil loss equation. These gullies are, you know, they're not, let's say they're, above and beyond. But this ordinance would be able to give me the authority to go out there and knock on the door and say, this is, once we put the numbers in here and they come back out, we could say this is a, violation of county ordinance.
Yeah.
I think it just gives you that much more local authority to say that, you're violating state law, but we don't have an ordinance versus we have an ordinance that says that, this is the acceptable practices in Dunn County because it was memorialized in an ordinance. Does that answer?
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Dan, on that
Yes.
line 290, the like erosion, which I don't know, like you disagree with it, but what does that have to do with the manure storage ordinance?
Well, I guess I don't, I'd agree. It may not have any, well, if we're taking manure out of a pit and putting it on land that's eroding is one thing. But this does go beyond manure storage, Gary. Yes.
then maybe we should change the title of the ordinance.
Okay, Nick and I have talked quite a bit about the title, but we did add agricultural performance standards and manure storage and management. So, I
Right.
mean, we did put agricultural performance standards in the title that we have now. So yeah, it's okay.
Okay, that's a good question, Gary. Thanks for asking.
It is, yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Okay. And then okay, down on pretty much on 397 and 402, those were you know, mismanaged. Those were definitely included in our um, previous manure storage ordinance. Let me go here. I'm going. I'm not looking at the same title. You're down to okay. Above there, Tom, on number 9, disclosure. Wait, right there on 387. So we're definitely saying now that a manure storage ordinance that has not been used for 24 months is an idle storage and needs to be properly abandoned. But on 392, we are allowing for that 24-month period to be extended as long as it's been designed and maintained, constructed and maintained in accordance with current standards. Our previous ordinance was a little unclear on that, but we definitely are looking at these allowing up to 2 years. And if there is a good reason, I think we have a procedure. I'm not sure what line it's on, but to come to the committee and extend that. If someone would want to have a structure that they plan on using in the future, we would probably, we can allow that to go longer than that. But it's definitely our goal, and we've been using a lot of our land and water cost sharing money and NRCS equip money to close structures that we know will not be used again. And then we go down to 402. That's pretty much language from our old ordinance. Interpretation of standards. And a little bit on, and Nick, we can have this discussion right here, but on line 420, there we talk about the current NRCS standard. So I think we just have to get line 420 to match where we looked at previous. Maybe just add the word current back on where we looked at that before. Okay. And then pretty much this whole section here is just, you know, looking and identifying the way, the standards that we would use and the models, the Barney model for on line 435 for evaluating runoff from a barnyard. And on 435, that model predicts how much phosphorus is going to come out of a barnyard at the present time and then after you do the treatment. The standard itself says there shall be no discharge from the barnyard. The Barney models allows up to 5 pounds of phosphorus normally, and that is what we're looking at is barnyards down to 5 pounds when we do a diversion above them, a vegetated filter strip, those things. So that's new to the ordinance, and that's the same with sheet and rill erosion that we talked about earlier. It would give me the opportunity to go out and talk to a farmer and say that the county has adopted an ordinance, and rather than saying, there's a state law somewhere else that, that you should comply with. I think it gives us much more ownership for working with farmers. And then 452, that is, the part of state law that requires us to have cost sharing available if we are going to ask a farmer to implement any of the performance standards. And I want you to understand there's a difference between this requirement to offer cost sharing than if somebody comes in to see me and says, I want to build a new manure storage, then we do not have to offer that cost sharing. Okay. If someone comes in to Bob Colson and says, I'm going to expand and needs a livestock siting permit, they go through these items. At that case, we do not have to offer cost sharing either. But if I go out on that farm and say that you need a nutrient management plan, say that, because of the conditions you need to, so this goes, it goes right with the enforcement, but I want you to understand it's there, it's part of the statute, and it's now part of our ordinance, our proposed ordinance.
Dan, I have a question. Anderson here.
Yes.
Cost sharing, I'm maybe the only one that doesn't remember this. What percentage is that again?
Well, a lot of cost sharing in Dunn County comes through NRCS with the EQIP program. And the EQIP program from John Sippel's office pays, sometimes they have a set unit per square foot. Sometimes they have a set unit per length of a diversion. They might have a set foot, set cost that they would pay for square foot or cubic feet in a manure storage ordinance if you're abandoning it. Our land and water money that we get from DATCAP, which this year and next year I believe is going to be $48,000, if we go to a practice that reduces phosphorus, that meets these NRCS or these performance standards, if any of those practices reduce phosphorus and meet those standards, it's 70% of the
Okay,
cost.
thank you, Dan.
And it's not, if it's not meeting the performance standards, it's 50%.
See, okay.
Okay, so it's not an easy answer, but we
Right.
definitely try to work with the landowner. If we know that EQIP pays better for manure storage closure, we have them go to John, and if John knows that we can pay more for building a dam, he sends them to us. So we
Thank
do
you.
work back and forth on that. Okay, then the next section's on applying for and issuing permits. And really the big change there is on starting on 479. We've put the requirements for nutrient manure storage structure plans in here. And this is something that Nick and I worked on. Nick suggested it so that if somebody builds one without one, we can look in the ordinance and say, hey, you didn't give us these things. And because otherwise we may be at a standstill. Even, and we realize that there are some structures from Weiser and that are pre-certified. We know that those meet these without, they're all pre-engineered and approved by NRCS ahead of time. But most structures now are, built in place, and we ask for these things definitely. And we can also take number 1 there on line 487 then, and let Bob Colson know that we're getting this application. Sometimes if it's an expansion and livestock sightings involved, we can share that, and I think that will, it's good that we have that in the ordinance. And number 499, we require soil borings And we require that either land conservation or he could be NRCS staff would be on site to verify those soil borings and what they find. Concur with them, I guess, is the word that we usually use, but we want at the time of investigation, so they have to let us know for $4.99 when they're going to be doing those borings. And most the last several structures that have been built, we've been on site, and they're getting used to that language, but now we put it in the ordinance. So there's quite a few requirements that we ask for the design of the structure and the transfer system. And then on line 531, we go down to the nutrient management plan. And there we have on line 538 that we have the current soil analysis. They need to do soil tests, bring it up to date, make sure that they meet that standard. And I guess Nick and I definitely talked about whether we should list more about what's required in a nutrient management plan, but I believe that we have enough data there. We can ask for a plan that meets that standard, and then we're also asking that they produce a checklist that's stating they're meeting that standard from now on, and that checklist comes in every year. I know that's in the ordinance somewhere else, but it might not be right there. Okay. Okay. Up on 596, Tom, if you can look at that. There is our fee. Right now we have set a $350 fee to come in with these. And I believe the livestock sighting fee now is $1,000. If a landowner or farmer is going through livestock sighting, then they do not pay this fee for manure storage plan review.
Dan, is that a sufficient fee? Is that by statute the maximum you can charge, or is there?
No, I have looked at several counties and fees are all over the board. Some are based on size. Some are, I believe, based on animal unit numbers. I feel that this is pretty adequate because we don't have an engineer that reviews these. We a lot of times rely on the DATCAP engineer, the NRCS engineer, to review them for us. I don't know. I don't have good data on how much time it takes, but I feel that's adequate. And I don't know. And we're not charging a fee to close a manure storage. I don't want to do that. I want because that's something I think a lot of times it isn't the same landowner that built them. I just think if we want them to close these structures up to protect our groundwater, I just don't feel comfortable saying, well, you got to pay me a fee to do that. I think it'd be detrimental in getting it done. But
So if there are situations where you feel like an engineer's consultation is important, we are able to get that through DATCAP or NRCS without cost.
yes, and the big thing, when there's a CAFO permit, then the DNR is doing a thorough review of that storage plan and transfer plan and feed leachate plan. So there we definitely, I think, and I think that, I don't think we need to charge a high fee for that, because we're definitely relying on them, and we've been able to get help from NRCS and DATCAP. And if there's NRCS cost sharing, that farmer needs a comprehensive nutrient management plan, and then a plan first before they can get cost sharing for the manure storage. And then that plan is automatically reviewed by NRCS with the same standards that we have in the ordinance. And I don't know if that fee is, I think it's adequate.
Okay.
Okay. And then we go through administration, and then on page 643 is the enforcement, and the citation authority there is definitely new to me. I will need to consult with Corp Counsel to go ahead with anything like that. Something I've never done, but something that I understand is and it is, Nick, maybe you can explain that a little better, but it's a citation is an
Like a ticket.
it's a ticket, right? Okay.
Yeah, there's the citation ordinance, which I'm also working on, there's a state statute, I can't remember the site right off the top of my head, but it basically specifies the information that has to be contained within a citation. And so what you do is you have citations printed up, you can use NCR paper or whatever, and then just you can issue a citation. You fill out the form, identify the violation, the section that's being violated, the person that's doing it, and then you give them an opportunity to pay a bond or a deposit in lieu of a contested forfeiture. So if you just pay it, just like a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, this is the amount, you can just pay this, or if you want to go to court and contest it, you can do that too.
Okay. Any questions?
So
Dan,
yes.
how many violations a year would you have to give a citation to on average?
I would sure hope very few, Gary. I would definitely work to solve the issue before I would issue a citation. It isn't
I'd like to see that in the ordinance somehow, not just, slam bang, we're gonna give you a citation that you'd work with the landowner first to try to correct the problem.
So, okay, okay.
I think we can come up with some language there. I
Oh.
mean, all of these options are already in here. And that kind of a more friendly outreach is always preferred. We do that in our office whenever we, have to deal with a zoning violation or something like that. But I think we can probably get some language in here that specifies a kind of a hierarchy of enforcement methods. That shouldn't be too hard. I can find something or work something, put something together for that.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I noted that, Gary. And I guess after going through this, I think one of the things that we need to look at is, considering some text on the using a stacking area the second and third time to address the composting issue that Tom brought up earlier. We can look at some language on this order of how we would come to a citation or come to that conclusion. And then the floodplains, so I kind of jumped around there. Let me get back to what happened here. Okay. And then the last section down and starting on 668 is appeals. And appeals come to the Land Conservation Committee. And there's a procedure for doing that if someone is going to appeal part of this ordinance. It doesn't really allow for variances, but it does allow for appeals as I look at it. So are there other questions? I think we went through definitely today, the highlights and hit quite a few of the changes that were introduced into this ordinance from our previous ordinance.
Oh, this looks good. It's good discussion. Any further comments or questions on this draft?
And Gary Bjork, I'm definitely, interested in hearing your concerns as a farmer. And if you think or look at something else and want to let me know, just I'll answer your questions. If you think about something after the meeting, even.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, then we'll do some work on this and bring it back for additional discussion. Slow process, but it feels like it's going to result in good language that we all feel comfortable with. So, and help the county. Good work. Thanks, Dan and Nick.
Welcome.
Then I think what's left is 7A, establishment of values for tax foreclosed properties.
Hi, Supervisor.
Barbara.
Yes. I'm gonna share my screen so I can show you the properties, but today we have 6 properties
Wow.
that were valued through an appraiser. At the next meeting, I'll have 9 properties to show you if there's time on that agenda. And those were less valuable properties, and so an appraiser didn't appraise those. We just went on kind of what the tax assessed value was and what comparables were in the area. But today we have 6, and K&T Appraisals did the appraisals. And before we, so today the goal is to set the value of each of these so that they could be set for closed bid. And just to kind of remind everybody about that process. So the properties are valued or advertised in the paper for 3 weeks. They're put on the website, and then we take closed bids, sealed bids, and they have to at least meet the minimum price. If after several weeks of that being open, there's still properties where there wasn't the minimum bid bid on, at least the minimum bid, then that goes to open bid on the Dunn County website, and then we take open bids for a period of time, and then each of those bids come back before the committee for your approval and consideration. So just so you kind of have an idea of how that process works if you had forgotten. So the first property we have I'm going to toggle between the large maps to give you kind of an idea of where the property is, and then each individual, the pictures of the property. The first map, the first property is on County C in Elk Mound. It's quite close to the Eau Claire County line. And that property has a trailer on the property that has really no value. And so the appraiser, in fact, it had an electrical fire and it can't be hooked back up to electricity. And so the appraisal took into account the destruction of and removal of that trailer, which was at a cost of about $5,000. So that's the burned trailer. And then there's some out kind of a wood shed and a storage shed also on that property. And then a garage that has nominal value, but is structurally sound. And so the appraisal recommended that this property be set at a value of $25,000. And so that would be what my recommendation to the committee would be. And I don't know, Supervisor Quinn, if you want to take motions on each property or at the end for all 6.
I think it would be, let's take them one at a time just to make it less confusing. So I'll ask if there are, you have any more comments, Barbara, on this?
I have no comments, but if somebody had questions about the
Yeah.
property, I have been to the property and talked to the appraiser about it. So
Are there any questions?
Supervisor Bjork,
Yes.
the, on this property is $25,000 is the valuation. Does that include the cost to have the person go out and do the evaluating?
that was at a cost of $450 for each of these 6 parcels, and it does not include that. That is just reporting to you what the appraiser valued the property at, considering the defects and advantages of it.
And this is Nick, that's a cost that's recovered once the sale proceeds are received.
Thank you.
We don't bill for it extra. It comes out of that whatever the sale amount was.
Any other questions? Well, just quickly then, a motion to approve this price.
Supervisor Bjork, I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Supervisor Anderson seconds.
Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. All right, got an opposed. One opposed. Property 2.
The second property is a property located on County Road K in the Irvington area, just south of town. Our office has actually gotten a significant amount of interest on this property. It took some time to get it before the committee because the previous owner was difficult to have removed from the property, but there has been significant interest on this property. There is a trailer on the property that is in poor condition. The roof has lost some of its supports, and there's a significant amount of mold in the trailer. And then there's some outbuildings, an old shed on the property, and a shop and a kind of a long Quonset sort of shop that has a number of tools and things like that in there. And so the appraiser has valued it at $55,000, and our recommendation to the committee would be as well. It's 10.69 acres, and so a lot of the value comes from its location to Menominee as well as the acreage.
Any questions, comments?
if I may.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned that it, excuse me, took a long time to get the people to move off the property. Uh, what what is the back taxes and the expense that we have in a piece of property like this then? Do you know?
I do have that information. It'll just take me a second.
Well, this is Nick. While she's looking up the back tax information, I can tell you this involved some legal proceedings. And so ultimately the county prevailed, and the former landowner just left. I guess he conceded that he didn't have a legal basis to contest it anymore, and he just left. It was contentious on paper, but not. It took a while, but only because court proceedings generally do. So I can't quantify the value of staff time, but it was several hours. The sheriff's department was out there and gave us assistance a couple of times just to help communicate with the previous landowner and for security reasons.
I do not immediately have that information available, Supervisor Bartlett. Where else I would have it.
All right, I was just curious to, if it took a while to get the owner to leave, that there might be extra years in the taxes that we would have had there. So I was just wondering.
Oh, I
Just
think
curious.
I think it was taken in 2017. So, and so there would have been several years of taxes since 2017 as we were doing those legal proceedings that taxes would have accrued if it was owned by somebody other than the county, surely.
So it looks like the value of the structures is about 23,000. That'd mean that be a little over 3,000 an acre for the property, the actual property. Any other questions? Could I have a motion to accept this?
Supervisor Morehouse moves approval.
Is there a second?
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So the next property, the third property is a property in Wheeler. It's a pretty far outside of Wheeler, kind of on a its own kind of gravel road. It has a shared driveway, and the property itself. Sorry, as I quickly move past those, but the property itself has a log cabin on it that is structurally still in quite good condition, although the deck has rotted out. There's a fair amount of trash and debris in the yard, and this shows the front side of the house and the rear side and the problems with the deck. There are, again, some outbuildings on this property, but they're in pretty poor repair. The roof has fallen in on a large kind of work shed. And then the inside of the house is cluttered, but didn't have any animal issues and didn't have, any sort of elements clearly coming into the house. And so this property was appraised at $70,000. And that would be our recommendation to the committee to set the minimum bid at $70,000.
Any questions about this property? Anyone have concerns about the price? Barbara, is there any provision for, in these situations, for removal of the derelict structures and that sort of thing, trash, or is that just go with the ownership of the?
That goes with the ownership and is reflected in the price. Perhaps it would, you know, if it was in better condition, be valued more, but we don't, unless it's some sort of amazing property that we would get our money out of it. We don't send highway out or anything to clean up that property.
Okay. Any other questions? Motion to approve.
Supervisor Bjork makes that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
The fourth property, I think that we should have some discussion about what the value, it's not, the valuation isn't as clear, but it is downtown on Main Street in the village of Boyceville. And the property, there's a house on the property, and just so you're aware, it's the next property, property 5, is kind of adjacent and has a garage that this owner had used. There is a house. The house is in quite significant disrepair and full of food and refuge and garbage, frankly. In every room, it's difficult to walk in it. There are animals and I can tell you, a quite foul smell. But there is also a detached garage on this parcel that doesn't have those issues and is in pretty decent repair. The appraiser appraised the property 2 ways, both with if this house could be gutted, if somebody would take that on and gut the house. And so that was at $25,000 was the recommendation from the appraiser. The appraiser did take into consideration because we asked him to consider the price if the property had to be raised. And so that recommendation was $5,000 if the property had to be raised. Having been in the property, I think, frankly, I think $25,000 is likely asking somebody a fair amount to kind of take on cleaning the property up. The appraiser wouldn't go into the property because there was because of kind of the animals and the insects and all of this debris. So I don't have a whole lot. I wish I had better guidance for you as to what the price should be set at for this particular property. Since we're setting the minimum bid, I guess dream big, and I would recommend something closer to that $25,000. And so if somebody doesn't pay or make that bid, we'd come back and look at a lower bid, and that would be then before you at that time to consider. So I would recommend something in the $20,000 to $25,000 recommendation, just to see if somebody has that interest.
Okay. Any comments or questions? It's obviously, every now and then we get a property that's causing a potential hazard to the blight to the neighborhood, or even a hazard to the neighborhood. And that looks like this could be that situation. So the recommendation is 20 to 20, is 25, I guess, Barbara, to start with, or in that range. Is there Is there consideration of that?
Supervisor, can you hear? I'll move that
Yep.
we set the price at 25,000.
Is there a
Moving
second?
forward.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork, seconds.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Next property.
So the next property, as I indicated, is down the road. So this is the last property is 466 Main Street. This doesn't have an address, but is down the road on Main Street. There is a 3-car shed garage that doesn't have the same issues. The appraiser it said that the shed didn't actually give it any value, but I will say we have gotten some inquiries about this garage and this parcel. And so the appraisal recommendation was $5,000 for this parcel with the garage. And so that would be our recommendation for this property.
Any questions? Anyone have a different valuation? Barbara, you said you had some inquiries and it may have more interest than indicated by that.
I think the appraiser's position was that it was $5,000 is what the land was worth.
Okay.
And it's just so you know how big, it's a 0.14 acre parcel.
Oh, yeah.
And
Very
so,
small. Yep.
so it doesn't have a ton of value, but I have had phone calls from individuals in Boyceville that thought that that would be kind of a nice place to put some stuff. So I think that the garage probably does have some value.
Does the committee feel like it would be worth sort of, in the interest of the county taxpayers, that it'd be worth beginning with a somewhat higher valuation and seeing if there's any interest, say $10,000?
I think that'd be a good idea.
You make that motion, Gary?
Yes, I will.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Diane, okay. Any further discussion? Barbara, does that seem okay with you?
Dream big, and we can always do the open big and then you can kind of vet really what the market price is. So I think it's a fair idea.
Okay. Then we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Supervisor
Glenn?
Berg.
I'd like to have 2 questions for Nick, if I could.
Sure.
Are you there? Are you there, Nick?
I am.
All these appraisals, they are more than enough to cover the back taxes, correct?
Yeah, generally what we do is we take properties that have better potential or are more valuable, and I guess those are probably both in the same category, and we do appraisals for those. Properties that are have lower value, we try to do comparables and make recommendations. So we do spend some money on the properties that we think are going to yield a better sale price. And most of them, I think we're able to recover the cost of the appraisal out of the purchase proceeds or the sale proceeds.
Thank you very much. And my second question, I think, is being answered with a picture in front of me of the Sovereigns in Otter Creek. So that was my second question, and I guess that'll be answered shortly.
Yes, yeah, we've had this property. I've been working with the highway commissioner. They've gone out there. They're doing some work on what it would take to responsibly and lawfully seal off the well. And then I guess we just wait for all the big equipment to come out there and raise the house. I'll let Barbara talk about it. I just want to say, if you'll, for the benefit of any new committee members, this house was built, I believe, without any permits, and it's almost entirely on the neighbor's property. So it was built in the wrong place. And after a lot of discussion, we decided that the best approach would be to simply remove the house and then sell the property, rather than sell someone an immediate zoning violation and create a land conflict of ownership.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
So yes, this is the property 6 is the what had been the Herman property. You may recall that they had been before you to requesting to repurchase it, and that was denied based on their status and resistance to pay their taxes. And we have had a significant amount of interest in this particular parcel in the town of Otter Creek. It is a 31.73 acre parcel, and there's a big main cabin house that sits on somebody else's land, as Nick was suggesting, that the highway department is going to raise. And then there are a number of other outbuildings and cabins kind of strewn throughout the property that don't really have a value unless you were going to use it how the Hermans used it. Was the appraiser's position, and I agree. So those don't necessarily add any valuation to the property. This $85,000 is the appraiser's recommendation. That does not take into consideration our cost to raise the property. Unlike the other ones that we discussed, since this sits on somebody else's property, the Dunn County Highway Department has agreed to raise that house. And so this $85,000 is what the appraiser thinks is a fair market for somebody who's buying it, but does not, just so you know, does not take into consideration what Dunn County Highway Department's cost would be. And I did not reach out to Commissioner Swirsky about that. I know that Nick has been in conversations with him about what their timeline for going and taking care of that cabin would be. But the current recommendation is $85,000 for this property.
And just, that's an expense that, we would anticipate would be recouped from the sale price. It certainly could be.
Okay, any questions, comments? Motion to accept the recommendation.
Supervisor Kinnear here. I make a motion to accept the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork, seconds.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, unanimous. Thank you.
And I don't believe that takes us through all of the properties that are available that are before you today. Like I said, I will have properties in the next meeting if there's room, and those properties, I'll make sure to get the tax value for those, but those types of properties, because they're small little nuggets of land versus houses and things like that, those are the ones that get closer to whether it pays off the taxes or not. So stay tuned, but that's all I got. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Barbara. That is all that is on the agenda today. We would have another meeting October 13th. Seems like we want to go back and again review these ordinances, continue making progress, and we have some foreclosed properties to look at, and probably other things. There's been some discussion that at some point we would be able to have in-person meetings of this committee again. I think the chair at the last executive committee, the county board chair, Mr. Supervisor Bartlett, suggested that we consider that, and it seems like in considering this committee, we would be able to accommodate social distancing. So I'm not sure whether that would happen at the next meeting or not, but it's a consideration. Dave, do you have any more thoughts about that?
Well, I firmly believe we have to follow our health director's recommendations, and with the spike of Dunn County doubling in the last month, I think that was the numbers that she may, I've heard through the grapevine that she may be recommending inside down to 10 again, as it was quite a while back. And if that happens, then I would suggest that we keep having our meetings like this. If it doesn't, yes, I believe there's a benefit to having meetings in person.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I have consulted with the health department director on the Health and Human Services Board, and it was her recommendation that we continue to meet on Zoom. She's concerned under the current circumstances about the resumption of in-person meetings, as Chairman Bartlett has indicated.
Okay, it's likely that we're not going to do that then. So that's fine. That's appropriate.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a question for Chairman Bartlett. I hope that in a few months we'll be able to meet in person, but when we do meet in person, is there any chance of continuing the recording of the meeting? I think that's been just an excellent thing for the community and also for us supervisors to go back and look at things if we wanted to. Well, how does that look?
I agree with that, and I attended a ADRC meeting yesterday that was held in person with some committee members on Zoom, and they had it on the big screen, and I think the only camera going was the one that the chair of that committee sat in front of the computer. I thought it went very well. And so I have asked that exact question of the administration department if we could try to do something like that going forward in the future. I think I've indicated that, asking that if we could go to in-person meetings, if the staff could, the majority of the staff, I realize one staff would have to be there to record the meeting and run the meeting and help run the meeting, but the rest of the staff could be on Zoom, and just the committee members, and if any public showed up, to be in person. So that meeting I thought ran really well. I hope that we can work the bugs out of that, and it works going forward.
Thank you.
Chairman Quinn,
Yes. Mr. Colson.
this is Bob Colton. We will have to try and figure out for the October 13th how to. I have a public hearing that is scheduled for the Farmland Preservation Plan. We are amending and adding to an agricultural enterprise area. That public hearing is scheduled for the 13th. So I will be talking internally to see how we're going to deal with a public hearing on October 13th. It probably won't have the entire meeting face to face, but we may have to have some accommodations for a public hearing.
Okay. Well noted. Anyone else have any other comments or announcements?
Tom?
Yeah.
This is Dan.
Hi, Dan.
I would like to bring a resolution to the committee on the 13th to make a decision on applying for an extension of the lake protection grant. And then the executive committee is the next day and the county board's a week after that. And so I'm going to ask, try to see if I can have that resolution on the 13th. And I'd like to have it for the application that's due November 2nd or 3rd. I just didn't realize that we had to have it ready for today's meeting. So I'm going to ask if I can get that. And I guess
Okay.
some input on that, but
Sounds good.
okay.
Anything else? All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care, Dan. Take care, you and your family. You're in our hearts. Take care.
Yes, sympathies
certainly, Dan.
with you and your family.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.